Diplomatic dilemmas in Syria and Iran occupied center stage today at the United Nations as President Obama and other world leaders met for their annual meeting. Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Margaret Warner is there.
It's an insult to human reason and to the legitimacy of this institution to suggest that anyone other than the regime carried out this attack.
President Obama came to the UN gathering asserting he'd been entirely right to threaten military retaliation last month over Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons against civilians.
Now, I know that in the immediate aftermath of the attack, there were those who questioned the legitimacy of even a limited strike in the absence of a clear mandate from the Security Council. But without a credible military threat, the Security Council had demonstrated no inclination to act at all.
And now, said the president, it's essential that the council does act to make certain the Assad regime hands over its chemical stockpile for disposal, as outlined in a U.S.-Russian agreement.
There must be a strong Security Council resolution to verify that the Assad regime is keeping its commitments. And there must be consequences if they fail to do so. If we cannot agree even on this, then it will show that the United Nations is incapable of enforcing the most basic of international laws.
But in Moscow today, it was clear the U.S. and Russia remain at odds over whether any UN resolution should threaten military force or other punitive steps against Syria if it fails to comply. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov.
In this situation, attempts of the Americans, actively supported by the English and French, to push the UN Security Council to craft a resolution that would contain a direct danger to Syria look absolutely illogical.
Russia has joined the U.S. in pursuing a negotiated settlement to the 2.5-year conflict, but also has stood by its longtime ally, President Bashar Assad, against calls for him to step down. Back at the UN today, President Obama was dismissive.
The notion that Syria can somehow return to a pre-war status quo is a fantasy. It's time for Russia and Iran to realize that insisting on Assad's rule will lead directly to the outcome that they fear, an increasingly violent space for extremists to operate.
His Excellency Abdullah Gül.
Turkey also wants regime change in Syria, and Turkish President Abdullah Gül urged the UN to focus on stopping not just the use of chemical weapons, but the war itself.
Now we speak of over 100,000 deaths. If we cannot stop this conflict now, rest assured that we will be talking about twice that number next year. I cannot emphasize this enough. Agreement on chemical weapons must not be allowed to substitute for a comprehensive political strategy to address the situation in Syria.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also appealed for an end to the killing, and to that end, he urged a halt to all shipments of weapons into Syria.
But we can hardly be satisfied with destroying chemical weapons while the wider world is still destroying whole Syria. I appeal to all states to stop fueling the bloodshed and to end the arms flows to all the parties.
The president's other major focus, the prospect of a new diplomatic initiative to resolve the standoff over Iran's nuclear program. The country's newly elected president, Hasan Rouhani, has shown signs of moderation and has spoken of being willing to negotiate over the nuclear issue. Mr. Obama said he welcomed the change in tone.
We are encouraged that President Rouhani received from the Iranian people a mandate to pursue a more moderate course. And given President Rouhani's stated commitment to reach an agreement, I am directing John Kerry to pursue this effort with the Iranian government in close cooperation with the European Union, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China. The roadblocks may prove to be too great, but I firmly believe the diplomatic path must be tested.
But at the same time, the president insisted Iran's words must be backed up by actions that are transparent and verifiable.
We are not seeking regime change, and we respect the right of the Iranian people to access peaceful nuclear energy. Instead, we insist that the Iranian government meet its responsibilities under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and UN Security Council resolutions.
President Rouhani plans to meet with European leaders on the sidelines at the UN session, but he won't be meeting with President Obama. A senior administration official said today that the Iranians told the U.S. it was, quote, too complicated to meet this week.
A short time ago, Iranian President Rouhani spoke at the United Nations, striking a conciliatory tone on his country's nuclear program. He also said that he hopes President Obama would not be swayed by, quote, warmongering pressure groups.
Nuclear weapon and other weapons of mass destruction have no place in Iran's security and defense doctrine and contradict our fundamental religious and ethical convictions. Our national interests make it imperative that we remove any and all reasonable concerns about Iran's peaceful nuclear program. We can arrive at a framework to manage our differences.